minimum.
V1.
Bank angle.
Good day everybody, and welcome to the first episode of my video tutorial series about the Aerosoft CRJ for Microsoft Flight Simulator. In this first series, we will fly from Paderborn to Munich as laid out in volume 3 of the supplied manual. We will start with a cold and dark CRJ on parking position 1 and do the safety checks. In following videos, we will perform an outside check, the originating checks, start the engines, taxi out, fly to Munich, land and shut down the CRJ again after we have parked. The objective of these videos is to acquaint you with the systems, the flows and the operation of the CRJ on a flight from A to B. Some subjects I will discuss in greater detail and others I will brush over in this first series. In a next series, we will highlight certain aspects and systems of the CRJ and delve deeper into them. Okay, let's get started with the safety checks. Now, why do we have to perform these checks? The reason is simple: we want to assure that we will not damage the aircraft or injure people when we put electrical, hydraulic or pneumatic power onto the aircraft. So, welcome to the cockpit of the CRJ. The first thing we will do when we enter the cockpit is we are going to check the circuit breakers. We have a circuit breaker panel behind the captain's seat, and we have another circuit breaker panel behind the first officer seat. Now, the best way to check the circuit breakers is to stand next to the panel, like this, and just check if all the circuit breakers are flushed. Any circuit breaker that is popped out will be easy to spot this way. Everything looks good, so we can now do the next thing, which is almost one of the hardest things a CRJ pilot will experience on this aircraft. The Canadair cockpit is really, well, small. If you think a 737 cockpit is small, think again, this one is a bit smaller even. So one of the most difficult things to do is getting into the seat. If you are a person of normal height, this may become a bit awkward as a gym exercise. In a simulator it's so much easier. And now we're in the captain's seat. Welcome! The first thing we will do in the captain's seat is look around and try to find the technical log. It may be here, it could be on the glare shield, it could be somewhere here on the seat of the first officer. Normally you will find it. We will check in the technical log if everything is okay with the aircraft, if there are any problems with it, which we should know before we put power onto the aircraft. In this case, we have a 100% up aircraft and all is well. Okay, the second thing to check is the position of the nose-wheel steering switch. It should be in the off position. The nose-wheel steering is hydraulically powered and we only want to have pressure there when we know it's safe to have it. Next, we'll go to the overhead panel and we check if all hydraulic pumps are off. After that, we go down and we check if the landing gear lever is in the down position. We check if the flight spoilers are fully retracted and if the throttle is in the shut-off position. Thereafter, we'll check if the flap lever is in the same position as the flaps. When we boarded the aircraft, we check the position of the flaps and we should have the same indication here. They were fully retracted at 0, so the flap lever would also be in 0. Now we go to the lower pedestal and we check if the weather radar is switched off. We have the captain's panel, it's off, and the first officer's panel also off. We check if the ADG is deployed, air-driven generator, it's not, and we check if the emergency flap switch is in a normal position, which it is. Okay, now that we have done all our checks, we can start putting electrical power onto the aircraft. Here on the overhead panel we have the electrical power panel, and this is the battery master switch. We put it in on. You can hear the master warning and the master caution. The lights will also be there. And you see we already have power for 2 displays here and the standby instruments. Now before we can start the APU, we have to check that the battery is charged enough to start it. What we can do, we can expand this display a bit better, so you can better see what we're going to do. And this here is the ICAS control panel. And if we push the ELEC button once, we'll get the AC electrical power. There's none on the aircraft at the moment. And if we push it again, we have the DC electrical page. Well, both batteries are on. We have an APU battery and a main battery. And 26 volts, 27 volts. We need 22, so everything is okay to start the APU. But before we start the APU, we have to do one more thing. We are back at the overhead panel, and we have to do a fire detection FireX monitor test to see if we will get a warning from the aircraft when we have an APU fire. We press the test switch. It says fire system OK, and this means all is well. We can now start the APU. At the moment, you can see that we only have APU door closed here. No symbology yet of the APU. And as soon as I will push the power fuel button, you will see we get an APU in byte, APU shutoff valve open, the door will be open now, and we have the symbology. The APU did a self-test. That was the APU in byte, built-in test equipment, and it's more or less saying now, hey, you can start, everything is okay. So we're going to push the start-stop button here. We will see a start light, APU start is shown here, and the RPM will rise and the EGT will rise. At about 60% N1, the start light will disappear and the APU start message also. At 99% and 2 seconds, we will get a green avail light saying that the APU is operational and ready to use. There is the avail light, and you can also hear that the air conditioning is kicking in and some more cockpit fans because we have AC power now. But we also have to check if we really have all the power we need. So we push ELEC again, and now we're at the AC electrical page. You can see the APU is running, the generator is supplying electricity, and the AC bus 1, 2, essential bus and service bus are powered. Now we go to the DC page, another click on ELEC button, and we see that the TRU1 and 2, those are transformer rectifier units, transform AC power into DC power and the buses are powered. Same goes for the essential TRU1 and 2, they power the DC buses. The battery at this moment is disconnected from the buses, so it will not draw any more voltage. After having started the APU, we can now put hydraulic power onto the aircraft. We have the hydraulic push button here, and we have the hydraulic page. As you see, system 1, 0 psi, system 3, 0 psi, system 2, 0. We go back to the overhead panel now, and we switch on pump 3A. That's the pump we normally have on when we're on ground. It's an electric pump, and as soon as we switch it on, you will see pressure is building up, and it should be 3000 psi. Could be 20, 40, 60 psi more or less, but it should be around 3000. Okay, having done that, we will return to the status page. It's sort of the default page. It will give us the information we need. And we now have to tell the aircraft where we are. You do that by switching the IRS switches to nav, and we go to the CDU to program the FMS. We go to POS init, and now on the POS init page, and you see we have 2 fields with boxes. Boxes mean it's a mandatory item which need to be filled out. The airport, well, we're at Paderborn, Echo, Delta, Lima, Papa. And we now also have coordinates of the airport. We could put these coordinates here in set position, but they're not very accurate. Let me show you why. This is the air ground. Oh, that's the wrong chart. Let's go there. The air ground of Paderborn. This point here, the aerodrome reference point, that's the position of Paderborn for the FMS. As you see, it is located on the runway. We are not at the runway, we're standing somewhere here. So we want to say something a bit more accurate to the computer. And how can we do that? We can go to page 2. This is page 1 of 3. If we push next page, we are on page 2 and we have the GPS position 1, GPS position 2. These are very accurate and I'm going to take GPS position 1. Just going to click here and this coordinate is now in the scratchpad. I can go back, previous page to page 1 and I can just paste these coordinates into this field. And now the IRS and the FMS know exactly where we are. Last thing to do before we go outside, I switch the nav lights on because I want to check the nav lights if they really work. And I'll check if the parking brake is set. You can see this here. You can also see it here, parking brake on. And that we need to check the brake wear. Well, these are the safety checks. The aircraft is now ready for the outside check. The autopilot can start the originating checks. And in the next video, we will discuss the outside check.